A harsh breath of winter air cut through the evening gloom as Nathaniel Reed knelt beside the crumpled figure on the frozen grass, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Miss, can you hear me? Please, stay with me. Don't let them take me back." The woman's voice was barely a whisper, frail and urgent, like a secret not meant to be heard. Her skin had the translucent pallor of alabaster, lifeless except for the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Without hesitation, Nathaniel unwound his cashmere scarf and draped it gently around her trembling shoulders before shrugging off his wool overcoat to cover her fragile form. Nathaniel Reed was not a man who frequented city parks after nightfall. As the founder and CEO of Meridian Hospitality Group, his evenings typically involved boardrooms and investment portfolios, not frozen parkland at the edge of the city. But tonight had been different. After a surprise inspection at a potential site for his newest eco-friendly resort, he decided to clear his mind with a solitary walk before returning to his penthouse. He'd built Meridian from nothing but ambition and principles, a name that had become synonymous with sustainable luxury. Yet tonight, fate had led him to a place where all his wealth and influence seemed suddenly hollow. She had almost vanished into the darkness, a shadow among shadows, like a fallen leaf forgotten by time. Something about the unnatural stillness of her form had made him stop. It wasn't the peaceful repose of someone resting. It was the surrender of someone who had lost hope. "You're going to be all right," he murmured as he gathered her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her head falling naturally against his shoulder, damp strands of auburn hair clinging to her ashen cheeks. Her lips moved again, barely audible. "Don't let them find me." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He didn't know who they were, but the terror in her voice was unmistakable. When he arrived at his estate, his staff rushed forward with concerned expressions, but he waved them away with quiet authority. "Guest suite. Call Dr. Winters immediately. Tell her it's urgent, but requires discretion." The mansion was wrapped in its usual pristine silence, the immaculate calm now disrupted by the presence of this mysterious stranger. Nathaniel carried her up the sweeping spiral staircase himself and laid her gently on the bed in the guest suite. She mumbled softly in her unconscious state, shifting slightly beneath the duvet he tucked around her slender frame. Dr. Winters arrived within 20 minutes, examining the woman with professional efficiency, checking for fractures, head trauma, infection, and signs of shock. Nathaniel stood at the threshold, arms crossed over his chest, eyes never leaving the woman's delicate form. "She's suffering from exhaustion, dehydration, and has some minor contusions, but nothing immediately life-threatening," the doctor reported. "What she needs most is nourishment, warmth, and rest. I suspect some trauma, possible mild amnesia, or emotional shock. Keep her calm, hydrated, and under observation for the next day." "Thank you. I'll ensure she's cared for," Nathaniel replied, returning to her bedside once the doctor departed. The room was bathed in soft amber light, casting gentle shadows across her peaceful expression. She appeared young, perhaps mid-20s. There was something profoundly vulnerable about her, yet also something resilient. Her body bore the faint marks of old struggles, subtle bruises fading to yellow, thin scars nearly invisible against her pale skin, signs of someone who had endured far more than a cold night. As Nathaniel adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, something caught his attention, a small mark just beneath her hairline at the nape of her neck. He leaned closer to examine it, a tattoo, subtle and stylized. His breath caught in his throat as recognition dawned. The symbol was a modified version, disguised but distinctive, of the emblem used by Blackwater Travel Collective, one of his most ruthless industry competitors. A rival whose operations in developing nations had repeatedly been flagged for labor violations, and whose executives had attempted to undermine Nathaniel's projects through increasingly questionable tactics. What were the odds that a woman bearing this exact mark, clearly running from something or someone, would collapse practically on his doorstep? Coincidence? A plant? A trap? Or simply a broken soul who needed compassion? Nathaniel settled into the armchair across the room, elbows resting on his knees, fingers steepled against his lips. He was not easily unsettled, but tonight something had pierced the armor he'd spent years forging. He glanced at her again. The rhythm of her breathing had steadied now, peaceful. She was safe here, at least for the moment. But who was she? And what storm had she just fled? As dawn's first light filtered through the heavy curtains, Nathaniel remained seated, watching the woman who had, without a single word, disrupted everything he thought he knew about control, caution, and chance. He didn't yet know her name, but he would. And whether she brought chaos or healing, one certainty already existed. Their lives would never be the same. The scent of lavender and fresh cotton enveloped the sunlit room as Olivia stirred beneath silk sheets. Her eyelids fluttered open to an unfamiliar, coffered ceiling. For several moments, she lay perfectly still, disoriented by the elegant surroundings. The silence felt thick, punctuated only by the gentle ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. She attempted to sit up, wincing at the tenderness in her muscles. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Nathaniel entered, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit without a tie, his expression carefully neutral but attentive. "You're awake," he said quietly, placing a tray on the bedside table. "Water, and something light for your stomach." Olivia gave him a hesitant nod, her voice emerging as a rasp. "Thank you." He settled into the chair across from her, his gaze steady. "May I ask your name?" A pause stretched between them. "Olivia," she finally offered. "Just Olivia, for now." He didn't press further. "Do you remember what happened?" Olivia shook her head slowly. Fragments. Running. Headlights, someone shouting, then cold. Nathaniel studied her carefully. There was no fear in her eyes now, only a profound weariness. She looked too exhausted to fabricate, or perhaps too broken to pretend. "You collapsed in the park near my property," he explained. "You were unconscious, injured. I brought you here and had my doctor examine you. You're safe. Why would you help a stranger?" The question held genuine curiosity. His answer came simply, "Because you needed help." She turned slightly, avoiding his gaze. "You don't know if I'm dangerous." "I'm still watching," he replied without malice, only honesty. Over the following days, Olivia remained in the guest suite, gradually regaining strength through rest and nourishing meals. She spoke little, but always with courtesy. The household staff grew fond of her quickly. Mrs. Bennett, the longtime housekeeper, began bringing fresh wildflowers to brighten her room. Paolo, the chef, prepared special broths and taught her to fold dumplings in the warmth of the kitchen. Nathaniel observed from a distance. She made no demands, showed no signs of deception. She made no calls, sent no messages, displayed no hints of manipulation. She assisted with simple household tasks, selected books from the library, and spent hours quietly journaling in the conservatory. Still, something didn't align. On the fourth day, he discovered her in the garden with Mrs. Bennett, transplanting herbs. The scene gave him pause. Her hair was loosely tied back, sleeves rolled to her elbows, soil darkening her fingertips, sunlight warming her features. She looked as though she belonged, but belonging didn't erase questions. Later that evening, Olivia passed by his study. He glanced up from his laptop, catching her silhouette in his peripheral vision. As she turned, her hair shifted, and that's when he glimpsed it again, that mark. He stood abruptly. "Olivia." She froze. "Yes. Your neck. May I see something?" Confused, she turned slightly, brushing her hair aside. There it was, the delicate tattoo inked just beneath her hairline. Subtle, but unmistakable. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get this?" Olivia reached instinctively for her neck. "I don't remember." "What?" He walked to a bookshelf, pulled out a folder, and opened it to a page clipped from an industry journal. On the page was a stylized corporate logo, one he knew all too well. It belonged to Harmony Pathways, a supposed humanitarian tourism initiative under Blackwater Travel Collective, Nathaniel's fiercest competitor. On the surface, the program claimed to connect privileged travelers with underserved communities. But Nathaniel's investigations had revealed the exploitation beneath the facade. Children overworked, locals unpaid, narratives sanitized for wealthy donors. He looked at Olivia. "This symbol is from one of their pilot programs in Southeast Asia." Olivia's face drained of color. "I didn't know. You said you didn't remember." "I don't," she whispered, her voice small. "But maybe I volunteered. I don't know why it's there. I just know I hate it." "Why?" Her hands trembled visibly. "Because every time I see it, I feel ashamed." Her words struck him with unexpected force. Nathaniel nodded slowly, the air heavy with unspoken questions. He wanted to trust her, wanted to believe she wasn't planted, wasn't another pawn sent by Victor Blackwater to infiltrate and sabotage his operations. But how could he? The mark of his enemy was literally etched into her skin. He said nothing more that night. Olivia excused herself quietly, retreating to her room, and Nathaniel stood alone in his study, staring first at the symbol in the folder, then toward the empty hallway. The question that haunted him was no longer just, who is she? But why does my heart insist on protecting her when logic demands I send her away? Nathaniel couldn't identify precisely when it began, when Olivia started lingering in his thoughts, or when her quiet presence in a room became something he found himself seeking. Perhaps it was the way she moved, always gentle, always present, or how she seemed to listen to people as if their words genuinely mattered. Even without memory, she immersed herself in every small action, helping the gardener prune roses, laughing with Paolo in the kitchen, learning to fold pastry dough with clumsy, joyful determination. The staff adored her. Nathaniel watched from a distance, more drawn to her than he cared to admit. But something held him back. The tattoo, the connection to Blackwater Travel, the risk. He quietly reached out to former contacts, previous employees, village leaders, and humanitarian organizations. He told himself it wasn't distrust. It was protection, for himself, for her. Olivia remained oblivious. She continued to live with quiet purpose. Once at dinner, she spoke about helping an elderly man at a nearby market, her voice fading as if stretching toward a memory just beyond her reach. Nathaniel remained silent, but something about her smile, through the confusion, chipped away at his defenses. Still, doubt lingered, until one stormy afternoon when everything changed. Olivia was in the greenhouse, tending to herbs, when she noticed movement beyond the hedge. A man with a camera, not staff, unfamiliar. She froze, then ran, not toward the house, but directly into the woods. An hour later, Mrs. Bennett called Nathaniel, frantic. Olivia was gone. He didn't think, he simply ran. The storm had swallowed the sky in dense, charcoal clouds. He called her name repeatedly, drenched to the skin, heart racing. At the edge of the small lake on his property, he found her sitting on a stone bench, small and shivering. "I should have known," she said without looking at him. "You were watching me. Maybe not you personally, but someone you sent." Nathaniel stood motionless, rain streaming down his face. "I had to be certain," he finally admitted. She released a bitter laugh. "Certain of what? That I'm dangerous? That I'm lying?" He offered no response. "I trusted you," she whispered. "But people like me don't get rescued. We get used to, over and over." Nathaniel stepped closer. "Olivia." "No," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "I don't even know who I am. But for a while, your kindness felt genuine. I allowed myself to believe I deserved it. But I don't, and I refuse to remain your question mark." She turned to face him, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. "I don't want to hurt you, but I won't let myself be wounded again either." Nathaniel watched her walk away, a hollow ache spreading through his chest. For the first time, he questioned himself. Was he truly afraid of danger, or was he terrified of falling in love? The morning air carried the crispness of early autumn, but Nathaniel's thoughts were turbulent. His contact in Bangkok had just delivered the final piece of a puzzle he now wished he had never started assembling. Olivia Winters, former executive assistant and public relations liaison for Victor Blackwater, CEO of Blackwater Travel Collective, Nathaniel's most cunning rival in the luxury hospitality industry. Her presence in dozens of press releases had gone largely unnoticed by the media, framed as merely part of the PR machinery. But to those who knew what to look for, her role had been significantly more substantial. She was the human face of Harmony Pathways, the same ethical volunteer tourism program Nathaniel had long suspected of being a front for exploitation. Olivia had accompanied Victor on site visits, appeared in promotional videos, and authored blog posts filled with carefully curated hope, until very suddenly, she vanished. Nathaniel stared at the image on his screen. Olivia, smiling but visibly strained, standing beside Victor at a groundbreaking ceremony in Thailand. Her eyes, even then, told a story no headline had captured. He leaned back, inhaling deeply. It formed a disturbing kind of sense now. The fear in her voice, her avoidance of hospitals, the tattoo, the way she sometimes froze at sudden sounds. She had been deep within Victor's empire, and she had fled. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Bennett peered in. "She's in the garden, sir." Nathaniel descended the stairs slowly. Olivia stood among the roses, gently touching a new blossom. She looked up as he approached and smiled, but it faded quickly when she saw his expression. "You found something?" she said quietly. He nodded. "I know who you are now." Olivia lowered her gaze. "Then you probably also know why I tried so desperately to forget." There was no anger in his tone, only pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to be that person anymore. The one who smiled beside a monster and helped him sell beautiful lies." Nathaniel waited. Olivia exhaled shakily. "Initially, I believed in it. Victor said we were creating something meaningful. I wanted to believe that so intensely. But then I started noticing things. The children working when cameras were absent, the funds that never reached the villages, the local officials suddenly acquiring new vehicles. When I questioned him, he said I was naive. When I persisted, he became cruel. Her voice dropped. He never struck me, but he didn't need to. Words can imprison you just as effectively. Nathaniel's hands clenched. In the flash drive, she nodded. I copied files, emails, contracts, and payment records. I planned to provide them to an investigative journalist, but someone warned him. I ran. Silence stretched between them. You showed tremendous courage in leaving, he finally said. You didn't deserve any of what happened. I'm not brave, she countered. I'm just exhausted. Nathaniel regarded her for a long moment. You're not alone anymore. But fate proved merciless. That afternoon, the storm broke. Victor Blackwater himself appeared on national media, seated in a meticulously appointed office, composed and calculated. With a measured smile, he addressed rumors of a missing former employee and alleged data theft. Unfortunately, Victor stated smoothly, Ms. Olivia Winters is a troubled young woman. She disappeared months ago with proprietary company information and has now resurfaced, conveniently residing with my business rival, Mr. Nathaniel Reed. He paused, allowing the insinuation to linger. Make no mistake, he added. This is not a coincidence. This is corporate sabotage. Headlines ignited almost instantly. Blackwater accuses competitor of harboring corporate spy. Who is Olivia Winters? Whistleblower or industrial thief? Nathaniel Reed's mystery woman linked to emerging scandal. Nathaniel's phone rang incessantly. PR representatives, shareholders, attorneys, and board members demanded explanations. Crisis management protocols were activated immediately. Olivia watched events unfold from the corner of the room, numb and ashen. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never meant to drag you into this. Nathaniel crossed to her and gently took her hand. You didn't drag me into anything, he said, his voice low but resolute. They did. She looked at him, eyes wide with disbelief. Victor doesn't intimidate me, Nathaniel continued. I've faced him in boardrooms for years. But this time, it's not merely business. It's personal. Olivia's voice broke. They'll destroy you for protecting me. Nathaniel tightened his grip on her hand. Then let them try. And in that moment, for the first time since she had fled, Olivia no longer felt like she was running. The headlines were relentless. From PR specialist to PR disaster, the real Olivia Winters, Blackwater's ex and Reed's new flame. Coincidence or corporate conspiracy? The woman between two empires. Online forums dissected her past. Every archive photograph, every blog post she had written for Harmony Pathways. Her face appeared on news tickers, analyzed by talk show hosts. Half portrayed her as a cunning manipulator, the other half as a tragic beauty ensnared in scandal. In every image that surfaced, she appeared more as a symbol than a human being. Olivia stopped reading after the third day. But even with screens turned off, she couldn't escape the whispers, the stares when she ventured to purchase groceries, the subtle way conversations halted when she entered a room. The voicemails from people she had once called friends, some expressing confusion, others disgust. Two-faced social climber. Probably planned it from the beginning. The pain cut deepest when it came from those she had once trusted, but nothing wounded quite like hearing the words from Nathaniel's board of directors. We respect your personal life as your own, one executive stated, voice tight with forced civility. But the brand, Nathaniel, the brand must remain untarnished, added another. Investors are growing nervous. Our Southeast Asian expansion has already stalled, the CFO observed flatly. You need to choose. Either publicly distance yourself from this woman, or we'll implement interim leadership. Nathaniel remained silent. He simply rose, buttoned his jacket, and walked out without a word. That night, Olivia found him standing alone on the terrace overlooking the city skyline. His hands gripped the stone railing, jaw tense with unspoken thoughts. You should let me go, she said quietly from behind him. Nathaniel didn't turn. I never wanted to become a liability to you, she continued. Now he faced her, his expression unreadable. You're not a liability. I'm chaos, Olivia countered. People hate me. They hate that I ran. They hate that I survived. They believe I'm using you. And honestly, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Nathaniel moved closer. Then let me remind you. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. You reminded me why I started all of this. Why I built my resorts near local communities, not on top of them. Why I refused bribes, easy deals, Blackwater's approach to business. He took her hands gently in his. You reminded me what it means to care, to choose what's right, even when it's difficult. You reminded me that I'm more than just a name on a building. Tears welled in her eyes. Nathaniel. He brushed his thumb across her cheek. You don't need me to protect you, but I need you to remind me how to live with purpose. A week later, at the International Humanitarian Summit in Vienna, the world watched as cameras flashed, whispers swirled, and Nathaniel Reed entered the grand hall with Olivia Winters on his arm. She wore a deep emerald gown, understated and elegant. Her composure was steady, though her fingers trembled slightly in his. They were seated prominently at the front. The anticipated moment arrived when Nathaniel approached the podium to deliver the keynote address. He surveyed the glittering assembly of executives, diplomats, and journalists. I was informed, he began clearly, that my presence here tonight might reflect poorly on this organization because of the woman I chose to accompany me. A murmur rippled through the audience. He paused before continuing. Olivia Winters was once part of a company that betrayed the very values this room claims to uphold. But when she discovered the truth, she refused to remain silent. She did not look away. She walked away from privilege, from security, from the career she had built, and she did it alone. He looked toward her. Her eyes glistened. And then I, someone who has dedicated his life to building an empire around ideals, found myself too afraid to stand beside her. The room fell into hushed attention. Well, not anymore, he declared, voice strengthening. She doesn't require my protection, but I need her clarity. I need her courage. I need her to remind me that doing what's right isn't always safe, but it is always worthwhile. He paused. So yes, Nathaniel concluded, lifting his chin slightly, I am proud to be here with her. And if that offends anyone's brand, then your values were never authentic to begin with. For a moment, the room remained silent. Then came the applause, hesitant at first, then swelling like a rising tide. Nathaniel descended the steps and returned to Olivia's side. She stood as he approached, and he drew her into his arms, their foreheads touching in the center of that luminous room filled with judgment. And in that moment, neither of them felt judged. They felt liberated. The file was merely 74 megabytes, small enough to fit on any standard flash drive, uploadable within seconds, and forwardable to any journalist Olivia had previously worked with. Yet its weight felt infinitely greater than its digital footprint, because what it contained, emails, payment trails, manipulated charity reports, internal memos about falsified volunteer programs, wasn't merely data. It was evidence of everything she had once stood beside and would now stand against. Nathaniel sat beside her in his study as she completed the final encrypted transfer to an international press organization and legal watchdog group. She didn't tremble or hesitate, but her finger hovered over the send button just long enough for him to gently place his hand over hers. You're not alone, he said softly. She pressed send. Within hours, the media storm reignited, but this time lightning struck its intended target. Whistleblower releases damning evidence against Blackwater Travel. Former insider exposes exploitation in volunteer tourism empire. Victor Blackwater is under formal investigation by the International Labor Rights Commission. Victor's smug expression vanished for broadcasts. He was summoned for questioning. Investors withdrew. His PR team issued predictable hollow statements about compliance reviews and unexpected oversights, but the damage was irreversible. Olivia's name was no longer whispered as a scandal. It was proclaimed as justice. But truth, like fire, rarely burns only its intended targets. Within days, Nathaniel received notification that 3 of his Asian investment partners were withdrawing from joint ventures. Not publicly, of course. They cited timing issues and market conditions, but he understood the reality. Too close to controversy, too risky, too aligned with a woman who had once been inside the machine. Brand loyalty wavered. Shareholders murmured. Nathaniel's advisors attempted damage control, suggesting a focus on Western markets, rebranding as a more socially conscious alternative. But he knew that wouldn't suffice. So he made the decision himself. He resigned as CEO, transferred leadership to his longtime COO, issued a dignified press statement indicating he would refocus on local initiatives and community-based tourism, and then departed the city with Olivia. They retreated to a secluded mountain property where the air carried the scent of pine and mist, and nighttime brought only the sound of wind through ancient trees. It was where Nathaniel had established his first venture, a rustic eco-lodge before success transformed him into a global figure. It had remained vacant for years. Now it became their sanctuary, their renewal. They lived simply. Mornings began with coffee brewed on a cast-iron stove. Afternoons involved exploring forest trails, and evenings often concluded beside the fireplace, reading aloud or listening to rainfall. For the first time in years, Nathaniel slept deeply, and Olivia dreamed without terror. But peace, even in its gentlest form, never completely silences the echo of loss. One evening, rain fell harder than usual, steady, relentless. The sky darkened with thunderclouds, and the mountain air turned sharp with electricity. Olivia stood on the covered porch, wrapped in a sweater too large for her frame, watching the storm roll across the valley. Nathaniel joined her, his approach quiet. For a time, they said nothing, enveloped only in the sound of rainfall. Then she turned to him. "If you could begin again," she said, her voice barely audible above the wind. "If you could return to before you ever found me in that park, would you still stop?" He regarded her steadily. "I'm not asking because I doubt you," she clarified. I need to hear it. After everything, the scandal, the board, your company, everything we sacrificed, was it worth it?" Nathaniel reached out, brushing her damp hair behind her ear. "If I could live it all again," he said slowly, "I would still choose to walk that same path." Her eyes glistened. "Even when the world didn't choose us," she whispered. He pulled her into his embrace. "I choose you, Olivia, even if the world never does." She clutched his shirt, burying her face against his chest as the rain intensified around them. Yet between them, it felt as though the sky was washing something clean. In that quiet mountain lodge, stripped of titles, scandal, and wealth, they stood not as symbols or sacrifices, but simply as two people who had chosen each other when it was hardest. And that made their love something beyond storybook romance. It made it real. The old lodge had evolved into more than a home. After stepping away from public scrutiny, Nathaniel and Olivia rebuilt not just the space, but its purpose. What once served as the seed of a luxury empire became the heart of something more profound. Together, they launched a program for women who had survived hardship, widows, single mothers, and survivors of abuse. Many had once labored invisibly behind tourism's polished facade. Now, they were learning to lead. Nathaniel taught business fundamentals, how to manage guest accommodations, design nature excursions, and establish ethical partnerships. But it was Olivia who gave the program its soul. She stood before each group, never claiming to be anything more than someone who had once been broken, too. With raw honesty, she shared her journey, from standing beside powerful men to fleeing their shadows. "I thought losing everything would destroy me," she often said, "but it only stripped away what was never authentic." Her words resonated deeply with the women. And beyond the lodge, her memoir, Silent Departure, found both a publisher and a voice. What moved Olivia most weren't sales figures, but letters from women in shelters, from young girls hiding painful truths, from people who simply wrote, "You made me feel seen." Nathaniel watched her flourish, stronger, freer, more radiant than before. And as he observed, he realized he didn't merely love her. He profoundly admired her. So on the morning of their program's official launch, with towering pines overhead and a handcrafted banner swaying in the breeze, Nathaniel stepped forward. A small gathering of locals and participants applauded as he took the microphone. "This lodge was where I once learned to build a business," he said. "But today we begin building something greater, community." He paused, his eyes finding Olivia. "And before we proceed, I want to ask someone incredibly important to join me." Olivia blinked in surprise as he extended his hand. She stepped forward uncertainly, her heart already accelerating. Nathaniel addressed the audience, then turned back to her. "The day I met Olivia, she appeared to be someone who didn't wish to be found. But I found myself the moment I found her." He withdrew a small wooden box from his pocket. As he opened it, sunlight broke through the clouds. "I don't want a brand or a legacy," he said softly. "I just want to be the man who walks beside you through whatever life brings." He knelt. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. They embraced as the crowd erupted, not merely celebrating love, but honoring two people who chose to begin anew. That night, beneath a sky brilliant with stars, Olivia rested her head on Nathaniel's shoulder. "Did you envision any of this?" she asked. He kissed her forehead. "I planned a very different existence," he murmured. "But then I found you, and suddenly, nothing else was necessary." 1 year later, the world had grown gentler for them. Nestled between rugged cliffs and a private stretch of coastline, a handcrafted wooden house stood, caressed by ocean breezes and wild coastal flowers. Once merely a sketch in Nathaniel's notebook, it had gradually materialized. a sanctuary not just for visitors, but for healing hearts. They named it Driftwood Haven, a modest retreat with only 5 cabins, each designed with intention, each offering serenity rather than extravagance. Nathaniel and Olivia resided in the main house, where ocean sounds greeted every dawn and stars witnessed every dream. Olivia's body had softened into the gentle curve of early motherhood. She moved with that unique tranquility, half serenity, half anticipation, her hands often resting protectively over the child growing within. Nathaniel wrote, no longer business strategies, but pages of reflection and truth. His manuscript, Heart-Centered Sustainability, was nearly complete. It wasn't about profit margins or expansion tactics, but about rebuilding the soul of an industry that had forgotten the people it claimed to serve. He wrote about villages abandoned after tourist seasons waned, about workers without voices, and most significantly, about the moment his life transformed. Not when he secured his first major deal, but when he discovered Olivia on a stormy night, lost and trembling. Olivia tended her herb garden each morning and devoted afternoons to responding to readers of her memoir. She had created a small podcast, Voices Between Lines, interviewing survivors of emotional and corporate abuse, helping them reclaim their narratives. She never called herself a healer, but listeners often described her voice as healing. Life was no longer rapid. It was rich. One rainy afternoon, as the tide began to rise, Olivia sat curled on the porch swing with steaming peppermint tea. Nathaniel joined her, draping a blanket across both their laps. They remained silent for a while. The rain fell gently, like a lullaby against the wooden roof. Inside their living room, the fireplace crackled with warmth. On the mantel sat their most treasured photograph, a candid image captured by a staff member of Nathaniel holding Olivia during a rainstorm in the garden the night she nearly departed. Rain blurred their silhouettes, but what remained clear was how tightly they embraced one another. Olivia gazed at it now, a wistful smile touching her lips. I used to believe, she said slowly, that I was merely a wanderer, someone with no destination, a person who belonged nowhere. Nathaniel turned to her. And I was a man creating places for others to stay, without ever creating a place to rest my own heart. She smiled, eyes glistening. Isn't it strange how we both thought we were lost? And all the while, he murmured, we were walking toward each other. The wind strengthened slightly, and Nathaniel stood. He offered his hand. Come with me. She raised an eyebrow, but followed. They walked unhurriedly down the stone path, past the cabins, to a new wooden archway overlooking the ocean. On it hung a hand-carved sign, the place we stayed. Beneath it, Nathaniel had placed a bench. On the backrest, etched into the wood, were the words, found in storm, chosen in calm. Olivia touched it, overwhelmed with emotion. It's for you, Nathaniel said quietly. For us. For every moment we chose to remain, even when the world urged us to flee. She sat down, and he joined her. They watched waves roll toward shore, felt the gentle mist of salt against their skin. Nathaniel took her hand. Whatever comes, this child, this life, this journey, I'm not going anywhere.